Hi, I'm author Nancy Flinchbaugh. In August of 2023, I traveled to Ghana to do research for a novel I intend to write. Recently, I interviewed my fellow travelers. My traveling companions included my husband, Steve Schlather, a retired journalist and copy editor, and also a climate advocate from Springfield, Ohio. Well, hello, Steve Schlather. It's great to talk to you today about Ghana and our trip to Ghana. How are you today?
I'm very good. Good to talk to you.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd just like to ask what motivated you to travel to Ghana?
My wife was going to Ghana and I wanted to go with her. I had never been to Africa. I was kind of interested in seeing at least something in Africa. I had never had a particular interest in Ghana, but it seemed like a reasonable place to go. And, I looked into the tour group, the Black and Abroad group that Nancy arranged the trip through, and they seemed like they had a really good program. So I thought it'd be interesting.
Well, thank you for going along with me. Um, I was wondering, first of all, what surprised you the most about our trip to Ghana?
Well, I tried not to have many preconceptions about Ghana, because Africa is a huge continent. There's all kinds of cities and all kinds of terrain and all kinds of people. And I didn't really know a whole lot about Ghana. I knew it had been a part that the slave trade had happened on their coast. And I knew it had been a colony of Britain and had been I knew it was an early one to get independence. I found out on the trip it was probably the first African nation to win independence from colonizers. Um, so I don't know. I wasn't surprised by a lot of things because I had an open mind going there. I guess I was a little surprised at how huge the city of Accra was. Uh, it's really, because we would drive for, I don't know, an hour and still be in the area of Accra. So I didn't realize how huge a metropolitan area it was. Although I guess when have seeing when I thought about it, it wasn't that surprising because it's the major city in a big nation.
Yeah, so 2.4 million people, I believe, it is a large city. So what would you say were some of the highlights of the trip for you?
Well, I really enjoyed hiking up the mountain where the the bridges in the sky were, or whatever they called them, so that where we could look over the rainforest. Even though I was very nervous about height, because I have a mild fear of heights, about being on those rope bridges high up in the air, hiking up the mountain was a lot of fun because it was about the only time we got to really hike in a sort of a wilderness area, and that was really nice. It was a really nice day to be out. And our guide was very knowledgeable about the flora and fauna of the area. So that was really cool. And even though I was nervous about the bridges, it was still pretty cool to look at it. Um, and seeing the slave castle, the fort where the slaves were taken and then sent away. I don't know if it's right to call that a highlight, but it was certainly something that made a big impression on me. I've read about the slave trade. It wasn't like it was news to me, but there's a difference between reading about something in a book and standing in a place where this has happened to real people. And of course, I think one of the things that really made an impression on me when they talked about the floor where we were standing, that we were probably standing on petrified um, human waste and sweat and blood that had accumulated over decades of people being sold there. That was a pretty sobering reminder of what really went on. Also, some of the meals we had were real highlights because they were kind of different, but not really radically unusual. There was some really tasty food, and I really enjoyed that since I like to eat.
Do you remember particular items that were unique to Ghana or things that you hadn't had before?
Well, I know we had plantains a lot, and I wasn't always real crazy about them, but there was one place where they had fried plantains that were that had a nice flavor. I can't tell you what they did different, but I didn't like it when they just kind of mashed them and made a bland sort of paste out of them. And we had those balls of whatever they were, and that was not a highlight, but many other things were really fun to eat.
Yeah. Well, what did you enjoy about the African culture?
Um, we saw the drumming and the dancing that one night. That was really impressive, and it was, just hearing the music played on authentic instruments by local people was really cool.
You got to
Um,
drum a little bit yourself, didn't you, at the one store?
I'm not sure you could call what I did drumming. I was maybe pounding would be more like it.
Did
Um,
did you
and
dance?
a little bit. So, and I think seeing the Nkrumah Memorial was very interesting. I'd read about Nkrumah, and I'm
Tell
old
me
enough.
a little bit. The people listening may not know who he is. Can you tell me a little bit
Kwame
about?
Nkrumah was the leader of the independence movement. He was imprisoned by the British for his activities, but then the British decided to let the Ghanans elect a leader while still remaining under British rule. And he ran from prison and was elected, so they had to let him out so he could rule the country. And then over time, he negotiated an independence agreement with Britain. And they had turned a polo field that was restricted for the use of the British into a national park, celebrating Nkrumah and his accomplishments. And, I'm old enough that I do remember reading about him in the newspaper back in the 60s. So
Hmm.
I was familiar with the name. I knew he was a socialist, which, of course, when I was a kid, in the 60s in Dallas, that was a terrible thing. But I have a different perspective on that now. It seems like
Yeah,
he
he
did.
wanted the Africans to have control of their own natural resources and to use them for the benefit of the people, which was not, good for the corporations, but certainly makes sense, as they were
And,
telling.
we drove around and they would show us things that Nkrumah had helped to foster, like when we were on that lake that was created that gave all the power for the nation of Ghana, and the neighboring nation, was it Benin, that also got their power
Burkina
from
Faso.
Burkina Faso. Thank you. Um,
Yeah, I think there were two hydroelectric dams, and
yeah.
that was still provides all the electricity needs for the country of Ghana.
In his later years, he became more and more autocratic, and so there's some mixed things to say about Nkrumah. On balance, he did a lot of good, I think, but I'm not an expert on his life by any means.
Yeah, he was forced to leave the country and didn't get to live there. Most of, he's
He was deposed in a coup, yes.
only in power for a short period, really, but he did accomplish a lot. Well, another thing we experienced was the naming ceremony. So, can you tell me a little bit about that? I know they didn't give you a name because you weren't coming home, so to speak, but what?
Yeah, you and I were just witnesses, and then the African Americans in our group were considered, part of the African diaspora in the Americas, and they were being welcomed home. And part of that process was to give them an African name. And there was an elaborate ritual that went along with that, where some they had a chieftain of the tribe there, and a person, I don't know if you would call him a minister, but he was sort of the person who was giving the ritual and speaking things and pouring out libations. And they had a type of, what kind of wine was it? No, I can't remember.
Palm wine, I believe.
Palm wine,
Palm.
right. We were allowed to taste that, but not as part of the ceremony. It was afterwards they gave us a taste. It was pretty tasty. And so they went through this sort of ritual with each person, and they would tell them a name. give them the name was based upon the day of the week they were born. They'd gotten that information from people earlier in the week and looked it up. So I remember Blair in our group, he was given the name Kofi because he was born on a Friday. Um, and then they would tell you what their name signified. So it was kind of a version of astrology in a way that your birthday says something about your personality. And of course, everybody said that the name was really appropriate for them. Of course, they tend to choose features that people are eager to claim, I think. So, uh, again, you can believe as much of that as you want. It was, but it was, I told the chieftain as we were leaving, I happened to be beside, I told him it was a privilege to witness the ceremony, which I thought it was, because it was not really something we were part of, but they allowed us to at least observe and to learn. And I think for the people getting the names, it was a very meaningful time.
I remember later when we were in the boat on that day when we were on the lake, our tour guide talked about his name, his African name. And it was also, he talked about it kind of growing into it, it was something that was meaningful to him, but also was something about who he became. I thought that was interesting. Did you notice the connection between the naming ceremony and the Cape Coast Castle, the slave castle?
Yes, I did. So I'm sure you've talked about this. I don't know why I need to discuss it, but they took us to the castle, and there's this door there that was christened the door of no return. Because that's where the slaves were taken just before going out onto the boats to be taken away, never to return. But on the other side of it, they've painted a sign that says the door of return. So they brought the African Americans in our group to that side of the door, and then we're welcoming them back and calling them by their new names. And then they walked through the door back into Africa. And of course, some of the people in our group were expressed an interest in coming back to Ghana permanently, or at least establishing a home base there. I'm sure you're talking to those people about how their plans are progressing.
Well, are you planning to return to Ghana? And so what more would you do or want to see there?
I'm not planning to return to Ghana. It all hinges on whether my wife needs to do more research. Um,
Would you
so
recommend other people travel to Ghana?
it depends on their interest. If they're interested in learning about that part of Africa, sure. I mean, it's a very safe place to travel, I think. I mean, even though you stand out as a white person, nobody ever heckled me I mean, a lot of people were trying to sell me things, but that's just the way things are in third world kind of countries, that people are trying to hustle to make a buck, and I respect that. Uh, and there's a nightlife. We went to some nice restaurants, and the last night we were there, we went to that restaurant that was on a high rise, high up, and we could look around and see the city. It was very beautiful. So there's a lot of different things you can do in Ghana. There's museums, there's culture. You can go out in the countryside. We took that trip on the lake. You could take a safari. Although I think Ghana's not a prime place for wildlife safaris. You can still do something. And you can see the historical sites and learn. And there's beaches if you're into beaches. So, I mean, like I say, it just depends on what you're interested in. It's a play, and it's fairly affordable too. I mean, the SETI was like $100 to $1, so you could kind of quickly figure out how much things cost. I wouldn't say things were really cheap, but we probably weren't going to some of the cheapest places. And we stayed in a pretty luxury hotel. I'm sure you can find more affordable surroundings.
Mhm.
I mean, it's expensive to take a tour and to fly all the way over there, but anytime you take transatlantic or trans-Pacific flights, you're talking some serious money. So people have to take that into consideration. I would recommend going as part of a tour because I think it's a big city and you can just kind of, I think you could get lost and not really know what to look at. Our tour was very well organized. You know, they took us places that we wanted to see. We had a group that was taking us around and giving us information. Sometimes I would have liked to know more information than what they gave us, but they were pretty good. Um, so I think that really added to our trip is that we had some guides giving us, information as we walked and helping us see things that we needed to see. If you go without being part of a tour, I think you'd need to do a lot of research about what there is to see and how to get there. Everybody speaks English, so you're not going to be totally at sea if you go there, but I still think it's better to go as part of a group and have somebody show you where you're going.
Mhm. Well, thank you for talking with me. Those were all the questions I have. Did you have anything else you would like to speak to?
Um, Nothing comes to me right off. So probably as soon as we disconnect the meeting, I'll think of something really important.
Okay. Well, thank you, Steve, for talking to me, and thank you for going to Africa with me.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure to talk to you as always.
An experience of a lifetime, certainly. Hi, this is author Nancy Flinchbaugh. Thank you for listening. I invite you to follow me on my website at nancyflinchbaugh.com and other various social medias. Please check out my book, Revelation in the Roots, Emerald Isle. I write for change, planting seeds for a just world where we work together to solve problems and respect the human rights of every person. Have a great day.